Hello everyone, this is Kat with CatNightTV. Today we're playing Brilliant Shadows, Part 1 of the Book of Grey Magic. This is Part 9 of the playthrough. This is a visual novel, and it looks like we're nearing the end of Part 1, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Let's begin. A cool breeze washed over her, making Ash shiver. Laying out on the grass during winter was less than an optimal situation, but the now living golem had refused to leave her side, and she needed the fresh air. She held a black rose in front of her and slowly breathed in its scent. No power came. How had she done it before? For that matter, where had the light come from? It still came when she called it. She had no issues performing reanimations. Was she somehow a Grey Mage too? The woman had said she was no paladin. The woman. Goddess, but she was beautiful. Ash sighed. The familiar clack of a cane, and shuffle of feet sounded her to the arrival of Alfnod and Belinda. She opened her eyes to see the pair, arms entwined. Belinda stood tall. She had survived the incident with nothing more than a fierce scar right over her heart. Alfnod had not fared as well. His leg had been crushed, and though with Prudence's help it had begun to heal, it was still months from being able to be used without support.
Don't mind us, Ash. I know you're wanting your quiet time.
We're just getting Alfnod out for his daily walk.
It's fine.
Well, I say you needn't mind us, but you may want to pay mind to Prudence. She is, not doing so well.
Alfnod did not need to say why. Hector still had not woken up from his coma. A week had passed since he had given up his hearts. Prude and Belinda had recovered within the day. Alfnod was still recuperating, but Hector hadn't opened his eyes since he had last closed them. The Rod of Finding found Hector empty of magic, and though Prude had poured everything she had into healing him, he was motionless save for a single beating heart and his breathing.
I'll go to see her.
Ash sat up and stared into the black marble eyes of her golem.
You know, I still haven't quite figured out how I made you.
The creature cocked its head and scratched at the growth where its arm was slowly regenerating. Ash walked inside, though, through the shattered courtroom and the workers toiling away at its restoration. A coup at their head, her contract extended indefinitely amidst the chaos, past the guards, and outside to the courtyard. Prude sat, looking as regal as had ever the old king, listening patiently as her commerce ministers brought her news of taxes and trades. Ash knew Prude enough to know she would listen with all diligence, but she had never expected to find herself in the seat so early. She wasn't prepared.
I am sorry to interrupt Lord Marlock, Lord Gakor, but there has been an important discovery made of the magical nature. I'm afraid something like this cannot wait. Thank you.
Prude gave each of them nods that could only be described as regal, and followed Ash back inside. The two advisors merely dipped their heads and exited the room. She maintained the air of utter dignity all the way back to the hallway outside of her room, where it dissolved with a long exhalation of breath.
Thank you for that. I wasn't doing too well today.
I heard.
Belinda, ever since she got Hector's heart, she seems to always know what I'm feeling.
Well, actually, it was Alfnod who said it, and anyone who knows you well enough can see it on your face. I imagine that's why Lord Marlock and Lord Gakor were so willing to let you step away.
I'm not doing so well with this whole king thing.
You're doing fine. Better than leaving your kingdom unstable. Do you want to go see Hector?
Prude looked ashamed, but then nodded. The two exited the room and began the long march to the magician's quarters, where Hector lay sleeping. Or at least he should have been. Instead, he stood as fresh as the day he and Prude had been paired, examining a silver sword, while a figure stood beside him in a gray cloak. His eyes darted up to meet Prude's.
Hey.
She burst into tears and threw herself upon the man, knocking him to the floor and smothering him with a kiss. Ash heard the man grunt from the excess of activity as she held him down. Jade's eyes peered out from a cascade of white hair around an ebon face.
We need help.
Then a second voice came, the other one from the conversations in her head, spoke, apparently coming through the sword.
We have to save the world!
Epilogue. Ash rested her arm across her face. She did not need to cover her eyes. There was no sun to block out, only an endless sea of stars. And yet the light blinded her. It burned in her chest, beating in her heart, right beside that familiar darkness. Today she had learned that her pair was no paladin, that she was something else. Neither Terra nor the sword had been quite entirely clear on exactly what Terra was. That meant that the glowing ember of light was her own. She was as a gray mage, possessed of duality, only with a single heart beating in her chest. How was this possible? Everything she knew of the magic was suddenly called into question. How much of what she had learned over the last 14 years was wrong? If one did not need to be paired to another to draw upon the opposite well of power, not to mention the fact that in Terra, the sword, and in the parent abilities of witches, there were so many wells of powers that she had never even known until now. How many would she tap into before this was all over? A crunch snapped her back to reality, and she started to a sitting position. A slender figure in a cloak as black as the shadows around it approached from the palace. The golem turned slowly to regard her.
Ash?
Terra's voice was oddly familiar for someone she had only met twice before. Well, twice while she looked like that, anyway.
I'm here, under the tree. Golem.
She moved forward with a grace that made her movements difficult to follow. Ash couldn't help but wonder if it was a type of magic, or if perhaps it was simply near supernatural dexterity. Terra came under what would be the shade of the golem's black leaves, and lowered her hood, her eyes looking up into the night sky.
It's so beautiful tonight. The sky is so clear and the night so dark. You can see for aeons.
She smiled. She was beautiful. She was a type of beauty Ash had never known, and it captivated her. It reached out and gripped her heart with a stranglehold that choked her words in her throat.
Yeah.
It was the most she could manage.
So tell me, Veronica Ashmore, do you know exactly what this is?
Terra raised a hand and stroked the obsidian fingers across the black phoenix that rose across her right hand.
It marks us as a pair. Surely you've picked that much up.
Yes, but besides that, from what I've learned, it allows a necromancer or paladin to draw upon their partner's power. That gives them access to gray magic. But my magic is very different from the magic of your paladins. There is a chance